Reiksguard are one of those units that I love. On paper, they look amazing, but in practice, oftentimes they're not that great. I've kind of talked bad about them a little bit on this channel, even though I do love the unit. There's one matchup, though, where Reiksguard always have been and are still pretty solid. That is against the High Elves. In general, High Elves historically haven't had the best AP tools. Currently, this is actually a replay from the Emperor on the live patch, not even on the Cavalry beta, so getting really aggressive here. But he's got Zentler's Reiksguard, 2 more units of Reiksguard spread around, Boris leading the way, some spearmen with shields, crossbowmen, great swords, Amber Wizard for Curse of Arnraer, and we've also got some halberdiers over on the side for the High Elves. Imric in the air with the Death Caster. A little bit risky to not go with Lore of Life, but there it is. Illyrian Reavers, got some spearmen, rangers, and some more Reavers over here with the Rahagris Pride, a regiment of renowned War Lions. So, yeah, Reiksguard. Why are they good against High Elves? Well, like I said, generally, historically, High Elves haven't had the best AP tools, and Reiksguard at 120 armor just have that little bit of extra over something like Empire Knights. They also deal much more damage. They have a much higher charge bonus, better weapon strength as well, slightly higher melee defense, I believe, but mostly it's because the armor, the extra charge, really is what you're looking for in this matchup. Generally, Elves are pretty squishy. You can see the greatsword spearmen getting into combat over there in the distance. Boris dropping down, and the Reiksguard are going to catch these Reavers on the back foot. Now, obviously, you would expect them to do quite well here, but to soak in the glory for just a minute here as the Zentlers come in and just literally one charge. They're going to face now Imric in combat, which is not ideal. They'll have to pull out of there. But looking at the rest of the battlefield here, again, catching these Reavers on the back foot. They do get a little bit of a counter charge, and now the Rahagris Pride are going to come in, but regular Reiksguard, even 29 melee defense is decent enough for a shock cavalry, 38 attack on the War Lions. Still not even going to be a great trade for the War Lions, just because they'll get outnumbered pretty significantly here. You can see they're doing some damage to the Reiksguard, but it's not anything too significant. They're whiffing a lot of those hits. Crossbowmen, very cost-effective damage being put in as well, and thankfully, I mean, the Zentler's Reiksguard Regiment Renown does have immunopsychology in addition to Vanguard deployment, so here they're able to continue to hold the line despite the terror of Imric dropping on them. I mean, they really haven't lost too many models at all. This is one reason why you'll often see White Lions in the front line, and I personally, Rangers are great, they'll trade pretty well against state troops, but White Lions are generally much better because they also trade good against state troops, and they trade much better against these heavy cavalry. But, yeah, just pressure on all fronts. Isles is still fighting, though. Imric is certainly still a giant threat. You know, 6,000 HP just about of Dragon to try and get through, and not a ton of anti-large, really, to do it. So, just crossbowmen, which are now getting charged by the Reavers. A little bit of Dragonhorn to buff up all the High Elves here. The Great Swords are doing a great job, though. Get it? And anyway, let's watch this charge now. Imric coming down onto Reiksguard. Kind of whiffs. One thing, Dragons are honestly in a really weird place right now because of a few things. Primarily, their animations are not... I mean, they're pretty good, but they're a little bit clunky and slow to use, and they have big hitboxes. They can often get trapped on the ground. But like here, you can see that he's not doing that much damage, all things considered. I mean, Curse of Arnraer was active debuffing his stats significantly there, but even still... looking at the rest of the battle, again, we've got these crossbowmen just continuing to annoy and be annoyed by the Reavers. They're kind of trading with each other more or less. We'll keep it mostly on the Reiksguard here. This other unit of Reiksguard just ground down the Rahagris Pride over time and sustained combat. I mean, superior armor versus a non-armored unit. Like, yes, the Rahagris Pride have AP, but they're really much more... I mean, they have more speed. They're much more meant as a cycle charge unit, even though arguably all of these are meant to cycle charge. Another charge, the Reiksguard, speaking of which, beautifully done into the rear of these spearmen. Yeah, looks like the Zentlers are finally broken at 6 unit models. Pretty impressive stuff, honestly, how long they've held out. But these other Reiksguard all around the field, harassing Beastcaster, going after Beastcaster. Here's the Amber Wizard. Oh no, Death, that's right. What am I talking about? Deathcaster gets dealt with there. Might come back for a few more Spirit Leeches, but now the Amber Wizard's overextended, and Imric's going to come back and just eat him. So that's some really nice value just immediately taken off the field there. And Great Swords, again, just trading very well into all of this infantry here. Not really, I mean, rangers are only going to do so much for you, so one of the issues too with dragons, especially somebody big and expensive like Imrik, is you really have to get value from the breath attacks, especially in the early phases of the battle, almost like, you know, use it more as a missile unit primarily in the early phase and then start to charge in the late game. But when you have so much value tied up in the air, especially against a faction like Empire, which this build wasn't even necessarily super wide, it's just, you know, has a lot of really solid, cost-effective mid-tier units, right? But anyway, Boris now getting chased by Imrik. Definitely doesn't want to fight him up in the air, but the Death Mage also getting finished off by the Zintler's Reiksguard. All 6 of them back in the fight, just getting that much little bit of value. Anyway, we'll fast forward a little bit as Imrik tries to figure out what he wants to do. Zintler's Reiksguard are going to go for a glorious charge against the archers. They actually do end up routing again. They lose maybe only a couple models there, but impressive stuff nonetheless. There's a breath attack, and like I said, you really need to be, and this is one thing, if you're going to use dragons, you really have to be on top of your breath micro, using it earlier on in the battle, so you can use all 3. Basically, if you use all 3 and get good value out of them, there's a lot higher likelihood that your dragon will pay for itself. But here, big pitched engagement. Boris gets a little bit of, what, Wiston's Wild Form? Yeah, a little bit of extra armor. Armor piercing damage puts him up to 675 weapon strength. Beautiful surround of Reiksguard here. Going to help keep Imrik pinned in and routed off. So there you go. Beautiful replay from the Emperor. Big thanks for sending that one in. I saw this and I was like, you know what? That is worth me switching back to the live patch just to see how these Reiksguard did. And it was funny because watching it on the Cavalry beta, I mean, one of the... obviously the replay's a little bit screwed up, but one of the Reiksguard ended up getting like 2,000 damage value. This time the value is much more spread between the 3 of them, but all very impressive. All paying for themselves. I mean, technically Zintler's Reiksguard are just a hair shy of their own value, but very good stuff nonetheless. 176 kills, 125 kills. Yeah, crossbowmen, decently cost-effective. They don't need to do too much. Great swords, one of them 89 kills, 92 on the other, not as much value, but pretty good stuff overall. Boris, Amber Wizard didn't have to do too much heavy lifting. A lot of the army damage just came from the Reiksguard there, charging through, getting in on those different pockets. Like, the Rangers are just so squishy. They're not really going to do much for you. Spearmen will do a little bit. They'll help hold the line. A few of them trade okay, but it's just kind of a light, high-elf army. Like, you really don't have many, or any heavy units besides Imrik, who, Imrik himself does carry 3,000 damage value, which is a lot, but you're just not getting enough from the rest of the army. Like, I don't know if any of these other units really paid for themselves. Perhaps some of the archers did. But this is one reason why I definitely would recommend White Lions, like I said. And, you know, whether live patch or in the Cavalry beta, in both situations, like, regardless, White Lions are just going to trade better into any Empire Cavalry. Even Pistoliers, right, technically, because they have more armor and they have some missile resistance. So it's not that much of an upgrade, and yes, finding points can be tricky as High Elves. You definitely want to cost optimize as much as you can, but they also have more hit points per model, so they're less likely to just lose like as many models directly on the charge, right? Because of the difference in armor plus the extra HP per model. Yeah, armor piercing damage kind of speaks for itself. With melee defense of martial prowess, too. I mean, they have really good melee defense for a great weapon unit. Okay, charge, it's not amazing, but it's good enough, certainly. And, yeah, from an infantry composition perspective, I mean, Rangers, they're just in a little bit of a weird place. I don't know that there's a lot of matchups where I would actually take, like, big line of Rangers, necessarily, even though on paper they seem like a really nice effective unit for the High Elves, you know, helping clear out some chaff infantry. They just, at 600 points, they're just vulnerable enough to suffer from cavalry and monster charges and archer fire, and like, they're squishy enough to enough things that it's hard to make them actually pay for themselves, even though they're kind of meant as a DPS unit. So I generally prefer White Lions in just about every situation. So, like, if I were to put together an infantry composition here, and, you know, you could argue whether or not Imrik's a good choice in this matchup, kind of talk about different lords maybe on another day, but just purely from an infantry composition perspective, just literally switching out the Rangers for the White Lions, and you may have to cut one Ranger, maybe take less infantry overall. The Hogger's Pride, I like the idea of, but, you know, maybe in practice they're not going to be so great against the Empire because the Empire cavalry does well enough. I mean, perhaps, but yeah, it really just need more, in my opinion, to be super worthwhile. But anyway, I'm kind of rambling now at this point. Hopefully y'all have enjoyed this. Definitely a very fun battle. I know I enjoyed it. So if you did, be sure to like, subscribe, share, all that jazz. Thank you so much again for watching. We'll see you next time.